should never have been, really. And when you consider there's 8 people, it's not that the 8 people didn't want to play together. You've got a situation of 8 people with 8 different managements, 8 or 9 record companies, 8 odd publishers, 8 managements, 8 lawyers, 8 accountants, and the end is listless, as they say. And there's just so many, just so many people that any one of them could have been the fly in the ointment and wrecked the whole thing. If you'd have asked me even 3 months ago what the odds of it all happening would have been, I would have said pretty slim. I think it's a triumph, in all seriousness, for musical sensibility. Yes it really is music, and it's always had good musicians in it. It's never had weak musicians in it. And it is the musicians who are there at the time who, for want of a better word, have the honour of continuing making the Yes music. And I think it is a fitting sort of scenario to all that's happened to the Yes band. It shows that music sort of triumphed over people, which is really quite nice for once.
Well, as much as I remember it, Chris and John met in a club on Wardour Street.
At the time, I think he was sweeping the floor, helping out the guy who owned the place or something.
And I went over and started talking about music, and we seemed to have the same ideology about music.
So he came round to my apartment, and we got a couple of acoustic guitars and wrote a couple of songs pretty much straight away.
At that time in London, everyone vaguely knew everyone else, and I'd bumped into Chris, several times, and Peter Banks, who was the original guitar player, I vaguely knew.
I was already in a band at the time called Mabel Greer's Toy Shop, and John came to see us play, and he came up on stage and jammed with us a couple of times.
And within about a month, we had a group formed, and we were rehearsing. We did it all for a couple of $1,000, £500 at the time.
Initially, our guitar player was Peter Banks, who was someone who actually had played with me in my previous band to Mabel Greer's Toy Shop, which was a band called The Sin.
And of course, we decided we wanted to do this thing. It was very inspirational from John. And he had been writing material and he had this concept in his head to do something.
And so we put an ad in the Melody Maker for a drummer and got Bill Bruford.
I think John called in response to my ad. I don't think I called in response to an ad by him. I think he recalled in. And then we met somewhere in Soho, and they had this real flash car, a little kind of Mini, orange Mini with black kind of superstar windows. Oh, they were very hip. John and Chris and I think, met that morning. We played that night at the Rachel Macmillan College, Deptford. And we played a Wilson Pickett tune called In the Midnight Hour for about 2 hours.
So that's the kind of show that we had. We had a couple of songs that we had, and then Midnight Hour, you know? And we just pumped that, and we had a good time. The audience loved it.
And I was thrilled that they could sing in tune and sing harmony. I thought that was great. This was going to be a vocal group. This was made clear from the start.
We ended up 2 doors down at the Marquee Club doing our Tuesday night residency. And we started from there.
Tell your mama, she'd only tell you that she told you so. The life you're leading, she won't believe the rest of the life we all know.
My love was jazz, and I just thought I was joining a jazz group called Yes. I didn't realize I was joining what was to become a rock group, you know. That was fine. They were going to sing vocal harmony in the style of the Beach Boys and Fifth Dimension. And I was going to play jazz drums, right? And away we'd go, and this would be great.
We were just combining our talents and just doing what we felt came naturally rather than having an idea about where we were going. We just sort of like got on the road, you know, to somewhere.
Very, very easy to make music because we'd all been basically in music for 5 or 6 years already. You know, I started in '63, so I was really, I knew about stagecraft already, and it didn't bother me an audience. I could sort of handle an audience no matter what.
In England, we didn't have a strong musical heritage of rock or R&B. So we just took the whole thing and messed it up a lot. You know, but whole sections of classical music were lifted. No experience necessary, no opportunity needed or whatever it was. It was a Richie Havens song. And that, for some reason only known to us and completely forgotten by me, we decided to have a little bit of country music in the front of that, big country. You know. So let it not be said that Yes is nothing if not multicultural and multi-ethnic.
We perceived music to be more important than the individual at the time, and if one person wasn't pulling his weight, it would be better that he moved on.
On the second album, Time in the World, we actually got into using an orchestra. Peter was very against the idea, and so you could tell that it wasn't going to be long before his musical taste was changing from the majority of the band.
The ideology is that you're in a bus and you're going along a road, you're going along a certain path. And if you don't want to go along the path, you have a choice.
We, in a way, got more serious about what we wanted to do. We'd recorded 2 albums, and I think then the next one had to be somewhat important. Otherwise, I think the record company was going to let us go.
Each time we made an album, somebody got off the bus and somebody got back on. And it just happened that whoever got back on was more immediate to the future of the band. So we had changes. Steve Howe was the most important beginning of change, you know.
Chris called and said that he and John had both seen me play in Tomorrow, which is a group I was in 2 years before. And John had seen me more recently in this group I was in, Bodas, which is the group I left. So they'd both seen me playing and they thought, well, you know, this could be the guy. So I came down and I think we all liked each other. I think we respected each other. I saw Yes as a good vehicle for me to explore what I'd wanted to do. And I'd done it somewhat in the other groups I'd been in, but I hadn't had the opportunity to work with musicians of equal strength to me. The injection I gave was a decisive guitar approach, which was relatively clean, sometimes friendly, and almost nice compared to a lot of the hard-edged sort of guitar work that still goes on today. And also some of the versatility of doing good acoustic work and pulling out an instrument sometimes that had a particular sound for a particular record, and in a way that's really a sort of technique.
He brought in a lot of the classical stylistic guitar playing, which we really would develop as soon as Rick Wakeman joined.
We retired to the countryside and rented a house, and we wrote the Yes album.
The YESYEARS No Disgrace was the first track we did, you know. The first track we wrote together, the first track we pieced together, and certainly has a lot of ingredients from everybody, a lot of strengths of arrangement also, and I guess it gave me an opportunity to split up guitar solos, so you didn't have a guitar solo running with the same sound. It was sort of like changing, went from a sustained guitar into sort of a jazz guitar. It was a very colourful track for all of us.
We spent an awful lot of time lifting material straight, wholesale, light, sections of light classical music, bits of jazz, lots of Wes Montgomery. Steve Howe was into a Wes Montgomery, Jim Hall phase, always has been in that guitar solo on that tune. Lots of TV music, and as I recall, Yours Is No Disgrace, of course, is straight bonanza. Isn't it Lorne Green, the guy with his snowy hair, you know, bum ba dum 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 da dum dum, dagga 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 dagga. We'd already done a track called No Opportunity Necessary, which is a Richie Havens track, and that used the fiddles from Big Country. You know, we must have been cowboy crazy. So this was No Opportunity Necessary Part 2, and we had the same bang, gang, 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 here it comes, bang, bang, bang.
But once again, with no real definite idea of what the end picture was supposed to look like until we got there.
The climate that we worked in was only a natural progression from the climate of the 60s.
I just felt that we were capable of breaking new ground with a vengeance.
Never before had there been so many opportunities for groups to put out records they wanted to make. And I suppose the producer role slipped back a little bit as far as groups started to write and produce themselves, which is what Yes were doing.
Yesterday a morning gave a smile upon your face. Caesar's palace morning glory, silly human race. On a sailing ship to nowhere, leaving any place. If the summer changed to winter, yours is no
those were more fertile times for musicians. They were allowed to develop something.
It was complete musical control, not only in the choice of material, but also in the mixing and in the editing and in the running order and the cover.
And record companies were run by people that liked records, like Ahmet Ertegun, great guy, loved jazz, has too big a record collection, makes a record company, right? That's what happens.
I can appreciate now more than ever how what that freedom really meant.
I see no good people turn their heads each day, so satisfied I'm on my way. I see no good people turn their heads each day, so satisfied I'm on my way.
I think in America they got to know us as from the first two albums as kind of a weird English folk group or something. I seem to remember people telling me that when we first came here. But we certainly weren't rock and roll either, because in those days rock and roll to me meant Elvis Presley. That was rock and roll.
And I guess it all started from there. It was a success in England and started the thing in America. We'd been together 3-4 years, and I think we played, we came back from the States and played a couple of gigs, and my last concert was at the Crystal Palace, actually. And then I went on to put my own band together. Yeah, it was a mutual thing, I wanted to do something else, they wanted to do something else. Rick appeared in the picture, and I had been working with the original co-writer with John, a guy called David Foster, who co-wrote some of the earlier tunes, and we'd been playing together and writing stuff and working with other musicians, and we'd kind of got this little nucleus of a band together. So it went from there.
Mr. Rick Wakeman, keyboard.
I was with a band called Straws, which I won't go into the whole history, but was basically a folk band that had started. I'd tried to turn into electric folk and things. And succeeded to a certain extent. On the last Straws tour I did, we were supporting Yes. After we'd done the first half, I came into the audience and I watched the Yes set and was genuinely very impressed because they broke all the rules. I loved it. Handed in my notice with Straws, and I'd already done that. This is in July of '71. I'd come back from a session, a late night session that had finished about 2 in the morning, and I had an early morning session, and so I had to leave the house at about 7, so I was only going to get a few hours sleep. Got into bed, and the phone rang. I said, "Hello, it's Chris Squire here." I remember the conversation vividly. He said, "No, it's Chris here, Chris Squire." And I said, "Oh yeah." And I said, "Do you know what time it is?" And he said, "Hold on a minute." He came and he said, "Yeah, it's 2:45. I said, "No, do you realise what time it is?" I said, "Look, I've got a session at 7 o'clock. And he said, oh look, do you wonder if you fancied joining the band?" I said, no. I said, "I'm finished with bands, going back into sessions. Good night," put the phone down. Then I got a message from Brian Lane, who was Yes's manager. Brian Lane said to me, "Look, why don't you go and at least just have a rehearsal?" He said, "At least give it a try and then see how you feel from there." I said, "All right." So I went along at this rehearsal the following morning, and it was at that actual rehearsal that day that the basis of Heart of the Sunrise and Roundabout were put together. And it was a strange thing, nothing was really said, because it was suddenly sort of like 7 o'clock in the evening, and they said, "Well, that's the end of rehearsal." And Steve Howe couldn't drive. And I said, "Steve, where do you live?" And he said, "Hampstead." I said, "Well, you know, I'd drop you off. And I said, look, I passed, literally, I live in Harrow, I passed by your door, I mean, should I pick you up in the morning for rehearsal? He said, yeah, okay, fine. And it was strange, and so nothing really was ever said. I mean, that was it. I mean, the rehearsal, I mean, I'll never forget those rehearsals till my dying day. I remember Chris coming with the opening line of Heart of the Sunrise, and Steve having the initial da-dum-dum-do-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo, and I had, and then I threw in the piano bit, the din-dum-dum-dum-dum, and then John had the, I thought, this is wonderful. This is absolutely wonderful.
Long distance run around, long time waiting to feel the sound. I still remember the dream there. I still remember the time you said goodbye.
So we were left alone. We were left to experiment. We were left to try things out, which was why there was such forward-thinking things that went on, as in Close to the Edge and in Fragile.
Nobody told us that you weren't allowed to do that in rock and roll. It was assumed that that was our job, that we would somehow embroider things, and we had evidently the technical ability to be able to do that. And we had musicians in the band who could write extensions to an idea, you know, who could develop things. For that you need a little musical training, which is not usually around in rock.
There was a lot of free-form attitude in the late 60s. But the early 70s, to have an incredible memory for musical notes, shape, form, and so on, was a great boon for me. It made me feel like I was part of something really important.
We as a band were very lucky, because not only did we have some talent as a band, and the people who were in it, and the writing talent, we also had the support of people who were around us. A lot of the time, I feel, because of the fact they didn't understand what we were doing.
You couldn't stick Rick Wakeman in just a rock and roll band, or Steve Howe. They had more going for them. And Chris, especially, his work with Bill, if you listen to Fragile and Close to the Edge, is immaculate.
He had very high frequencies coming out of the bass. He was always playing somewhere up here rather than somewhere down there. And the bass cut very cleanly. In the days of poor amplification, that meant that I, in order to get my snare drum to cut, had to get the higher frequencies out of my snare drum. So I tended to play rim shots, which made the thing go pong, you know, to try to cut through.
We were after to try and get as much emotion into melodies, into making the full use of a melody by doing key changes, by doing rhythm changes, by changing the notes around, chordal structures underneath it, getting the most out of it, working very much on a classical principle.
It certainly epitomises the time. Obviously, Fragile is the time, and it's that time that our creativity got so high. We all had our own tracks on Fragile, which allowed us, you know, to taste that freedom, to do a track any way we wanted it. Roundabout, yeah. It reminds me of Scotland because we were up there when John and I started writing this. We knew even then, John and I, as a team, we would listen to the other guys, what the arrangement, new ideas that they would bring in. And so it got to be quite an expansive piece. The first piece I did really where I kept the acoustic guitar quite continuous in it. There was the group, but the acoustic guitar, usually the acoustic guitar was designated to be a feature, you know, when other people stopped. But I was very interested in playing it with the band, you know. And at the time we didn't have the technology. We only had mics. It was really difficult to do on stage, but eventually, you know, things improved and we can get an acoustic guitar as big as the group now.
We just played anywhere and everywhere. It was the days when there was 4 on the bill and we were given like 20 minutes to play a set with whatever gear we were allowed to manage to get on stage. And most of the time it was in the big auditoriums and people were just still coming in. And they were making as much noise, if not more than we were on stage. But the interesting thing was, I wasn't convinced that people were even listening. But it's amazing, they were.
Funny enough, we started to, I think of it as like hedge your bets ideas. Somebody plays something, and you hear it, and if you like it, you start sort of scanning what you've been playing recently and think, well, I think if I changed the key of this thing and put it into that, you know, maybe that's the same tempo. You start hooking ideas together very tentatively. But funny enough, that is the basis of composition, is that you take, you know, you hedge bets. You think that something might work. And if it doesn't, you scrap it and put something else in. We started writing all the songs like that, basically. Or taking a very simple idea and then adding other layers. Everybody had to be melodic. The bass was melodic, the guitar was melodic, the keyboards was melodic. Even the drums, bless his heart, Bill, is somehow hinting all the time at melody and not just rhythm, because in fact what signifies a lot more 80s Yes music is the emphasis on rhythm, but in the 70s the emphasis was really on melody and how to plateau that melody.
Getting over all that time I had to wear it, leaving all the changes far behind. Leaving the tension to find out. By the time we moved into Close to the Edge, for instance, we were putting together Close to the Edge like
3 minutes, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, 60 seconds. Editing, getting the scissors out and editing pieces of music together. If it didn't fit, you try another piece. So the idea of starting a long piece of music is letting the music control you. They actually came out of abundance of energy, which is really breaking into a whole different pattern of thinking for musicians alike, that groups will be able to try longer pieces of music without effort.
It was golden days. It was fantastic. Albums like Fragile, albums like Close to the Edge. We did lots of things that went wrong. We tried things. We were probably a little pompous in places.
Everyone had an idea, so the songs tended to grow in order to encompass everyone's ideas.
Success through freedom that an artist can find when he isn't swayed or rearranged after the event. So bravo the 70s.
I mean, the whole LP was put together fast, I mean, you'd laugh at how it was done, because we used to have a gig. This is the LP Close to the Edge. We would have a gig we go into the studio on a Monday or Tuesday and record the first quarter of a track, because we couldn't figure out what the next 3 quarters were, so we'd record that. Break everything down, drive up to the north of England, do a gig on Wednesday night, set the drums and everything back up in the studio and continue the track on Thursday. So all the sounds, for those of us who are not in the know, all the sounds therefore would change and everything was completely different. That's an unusual way of making records.
You had Rick Wakeman and Steve and Chris really working very hard, and Bill on arrangements.
I could push the guitar up and somebody could push the bass up, and then we'd talk about it. Okay, you want to do that? Fine, well maybe we should plan this. And we really got the music, really how the group wanted it to do.
Yes was a slow-moving organization with a lot of discussion, democratic to a fault. We'd all gather around and discuss whether the next bass note should be F or should it be F sharp, and this took a while, as you can imagine.
Being outside of the musicality of it, I could look at it as a whole and direct everybody as they went along. Not all the time, but I was able to help out when things got a bit sticky.
From, say, Perpetual Change to Close to the Edge, there was quite a lot of different guitar work going on. And that was my work, that's my pleasure, as well, to do that. I like to do it with total control over the guitar picture.
Close to the Edge wasn't just one side of one piece, it was a whole scenario, really, of 3 pieces. And I knew, and it's like a mini quintet sonata in a strange way. It has different movements which all go into each other. The object was of having a piece of music that was everything that the Yes critics hated us for and the Yes people, Yes fans loved us for, which was emotional. received exactly the reaction that we thought it would be from the people who liked what we did. They thought we'd actually managed to achieve it really well within NU and I, and those who didn't like us just slated it to death.
What the group seemed to sense was that to keep everybody happy was to keep involving people as much as possible, encouraging this writing, encouraging ideas to be implanted amid somebody else's ideas. And that's really one of the hardest things to keep alive in a group.
The songs were always a problem. Nobody knew how to finish them. And to tell you the truth, with Close to the Edge, we got lucky. Because 3/4 of the way through the side of an LP, nobody knew what the conclusion to the music was. Least of all me.
We had to hang on to our ideas and develop them, arrange them, and try not to forget them the next day. Because sometimes we'd come in and say, God, what did we do to this? And many classic Yes bits of arranging have gone out the window. I mean, we actually forgot them. They were too intricate, too specialised, or one guy was the key to it, and he was the guy who didn't remember it the next day. So obviously we taped things, we started to have tapes of rehearsals going on all the time.
Lots of people all think that you're all kids on the block, like Bon Jovi or something, and you're all going to agree on the music. We only ever disagreed. We could never agree on anything, which is why the music came out so funny.
And that's what all the music did that came into the group. It went through this skewer, this cheese grater, you know, and by the time it came out the other side, it didn't look like quite what you'd planned, but there was everybody's input.
And when you get 5 people trying to do it, it can also become, you know, very confusing.
I mean, I'm saying after a while you start to notice that you write with this guy. And you start to notice, you know, and other people start saying, well, you better write with him because you wrote this song together. That is the end. That's goodbye to it just being that little intimacy.
And at times we got lucky, and sometimes the arrangements are better than others, you know. I always liked Siberian Khatru, which I thought was a great arrangement. It's not one you have to really remember. There is a great logic to it, and it develops nicely, you know. We had a good day that day, or a good week that week.
Yes was the real learning about the nuts and bolts of what we did. So we were all doing that together. We all came through together. And this can't happen again. And that's why it was so special. And we had Eddie, of course, where he was fresh to it all too. And it was all new to him. Making these records with us was new. And that newness was marvellous, you know. Before we all got too big for our boots, you know.
After the Close to the Edge album, Bill actually left, joining King Crimson.
It's all very well playing a bit, but you have to understand that you have to enlarge your vocabulary, and the way you do that is by fraternizing in music, in other musical situations. That's how you learn to develop things. So after Close to the Edge, all I could think of that I would be able to contribute to the next record would be Son of Close to the Edge. And I didn't really see any point in that.
He was lured away by Bob Fripp, as I said, because of Bill's sort of basic love of jazz. He was more interested in going that way.
So that position became available. I told Robert I'd like to do that. He said in his inimitable style, "I think you're about ready now, Bill," in his pretentious way, bless him. And I thought I'd do that. But of course that caused a bit of an uproar. And people now in America 20 years later still ask me why I left, but I left for good musical reasons.
And that was the first time that I saw a crack appear on the wall. And it was quite a big crack. And because of the style of the way that Bill played, a difficult position to fill. Eddie Offord, who was producing at the time, knew Alan very well, and I knew of Alan's playing.
They were rehearsing Siberian Khatru in order to do the Close to the Edge album. And Bill had left early that night, and the rest of the band were kind of stood there holding the instruments. And they said, well, Alan plays drums, so that was actually the first song I ever played with the band. I just sat in. I seemed to fit in and just naturally play it, and possibly that stuck in some people's minds.
But it just seemed quite a radical thing to change so far from one kind of drummer to another kind. And John was the main instigator of Alan coming in.
Chris and John came up to Eddie Offord's apartment and asked me to join the band. And I said, well, you know, there's a difference in styles. And basically, we should each check each other out for 3 months, and which we did. And here I am 19 years later, almost.
I learned an awful lot from, in a way, having to adjust to playing with Alan. So in a way, fortunately, it broadened my own experience.
Chris threatened to throw me out the window if I didn't join the band, number one. And secondly, as they were leaving, he said, oh, by the way, we have a gig in front of 10,000 people in 3 days' time. Can you learn all of the material?
Alan came in and just did an unbelievable job. I mean, I have to say, I mean, he's a totally diverse type of drummer, to totally opposite in every way, manner, fashion or form. And came in and played the pieces in his own style.
I think it was one rehearsal before we actually went on stage. And to play things like Heart of the Sunrise and all of that kind of material at that time was very challenging, but everything seemed to work.
Fragile, Close to the Edge, and halfway into Topographic Oceans, things started to change. I think Topographic Oceans was a sort of meeting point of high ideals and low energy.
When this idea of a few songs suddenly started to become bigger and bigger into Topographic Oceans, it daunted the other guys in the band. They said, well, you know, I think it was Rick was most unsure whether this was a good idea. Double album, 4 songs.
In the middle of it all, there was me really trying to maybe force the guys into an area that they didn't really know about.
But gradually, I think our excitement about the idea, they gradually thought there's something here, you know, let's do it. They weren't difficult to lead to the water.
Yes really is a band that's always been adventurous and moved forward and tried to create something that nobody else was doing.
To try and push a group into a musical unknown territory needed everybody's total concentration.
Did this album that I just couldn't get into. I couldn't get into it musically, the way it was put together. There was a lot of experimental playing going on. I mean, where we went into the studio where we didn't really have stuff that was written, and we were just doing work in the studio that I felt should have been done in a rehearsal room. There were some strong, very strong melodies and things going around, but there was also an awful lot of padding of things that I felt were being bled to death.
It wasn't just an album, it was an experience. We somehow worked in different ways. We had scenery in the studio.
We went for a big, major scale possibility. I think because I'd read somewhere that, oh, the next thing that Yes will do is put the Bible to music, you know. And I thought, right, suckers, I'll show you. We can do it. It can be done.
Very often Eddie Offord was underneath the desk, playing with his little 1/4-inch machine, a Stellavox. And we'd come in and say, Eddie, where are you, man? Where are you? He said, I'm under here. Where's that? I'm under here. He said, what are you under there for? He said, well, somebody cut this edit out and I need to stick it back. It was just like a... It's like a lifestyle record.
Call me my love, call me today, call me round. Travel we say, wonder we choose love June.
now had a band with 5 very headstrong characters in it.
Why say that it cannot be done? Why always say, well, oh, they'd be better doing pop songs?
I decided very much that I didn't like this album. I decided that this album was not good, and of course, in my eyes, it got worse and worse and worse.
They call it dissent within the ranks. Starts to creep in, and it comes in many different forms. It comes in frustration, a lack of dedication, and so on. And that happens. It's, you know, it happens, and no one's to blame. I think it's outside influences.
Because I'd openly said in the press that what I thought of the album, which wasn't very clever, but I openly said what I thought of it, I'd actually alienated myself quite heavily from the rest of the band. And other stupid factors then came into consideration. The fact that at that time that I was the only one who wasn't a vegetarian at that time. So everything that the press could latch onto, they latched onto. The fact that, and if they could get a picture of me with a sort of a steak sandwich in my hand and walking into a pub while the rest of the band were discussing Tales from Topographic Oceans in a health food restaurant, I mean, those were the pictures they showed. I mean, it was good press.
Whether it was always me, probably it was always me, because I was like Napoleon. What the hell? I don't care. I just felt that there was a meaning to it all. So we didn't go, in fact, into the realms of the unknown. Rick left the group very unhappily.
Can you imagine, on your birthday, age 25, you leave something that your heart is really with for moralistic reasons. Your second album for a record company becomes their first #1 in the UK, and it's your birthday. I mean, boy, I mean, it was a day I will never ever forget.
I don't think people were happy about it, but we set upon the task of creating a new album, which eventually was called Relaya. And Patrick came into the band, and it was a very short-lived period. But Patrick, I think it's some of the best work that Patrick ever did.
He's a strange one in the first place because he's a Swiss rock musician. I mean, how many are there? I think he's, yeah, you know, how many famous Swiss rock bands are there? Not too many, you know. probably play very well in time.
Sound Chaser was very, very adventurous from a rhythm section point of view. And I thought some of the best solos he's ever played in his life were done on that album.
Relaya was the first time that I walked in with a complete piece of music in my head, which was Gates of Delirium. I pounded away on the piano in front of the guys, this whole idea, and they must have thought I was a real complete idiot. Da-dun, 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 da-dun. So it goes like there's a war going on, fighting. I think that by then we realized that there was a key to stagecraft, stage production, theatre and music and colour, and we've been sort of dragging Roger Dean along with us. The stage design was brilliant. From a stage point of view, we discovered more to music than just making music. There was a lot of theatre, and that's what the Relaya album personified, a major show, a major visual art. I think we did some great shows, and it cost us a fortune because we were travelling around with like tons of equipment, trying to put on Aida at every gig. I said, guys, we're going to kill ourselves, we're going to ruin the band, and so we had the time off to do, everybody did a solo album, and it really worked. It was very hard for the record company to appreciate what we were up to, and that's when you start to say, well, who's in control here? Is it the business, the record company, or the musician, or the artist within the musician that says, No, I'll do what I think is the right thing and hope that somebody likes it.
You can hide it, lose it, but it's always found. You can laugh it off, but it always comes back on you. So it's true enough to hold out your hand for emotion, like promotion, to reverse is to repeat. All you got to do is hold out your hand for the treasures of the universe and lay at your feet.
Obviously, it was a good outlet. I spent in a cumulative period of about 9 or 10 weeks. I didn't spend an overly long period of time making it. Actually, I put a studio in my house, so I was also like christening that with my album. Yeah, I think I'll make another one next year.
Hold out your hand, span the distance, more resistance to attack is to retreat. Almost close enough to hold out your hand for the treasures of the universe.
I decided to do a solo album. I actually got a lot of equipment, keyboards, 24-track, drums, percussion, of all sorts and sizes, put it in my garage and locked myself away for 6 months and nearly went mad. Created an album called Elias of Sunhillow. It's a story of the ancient times. It was a very special moment in the development of my career as an artist, and I'm very proud of that album.
I decided to attempt not to play anything that other people played in the rock field. I started to think of myself more like a guitarist, say from the 20s, like Roy Smack, who played all guitars, all kinds of instruments.
My own philosophy was to take rock and roll music, but adapt different things into it, such as jazz and the fusion and odd kinds of meter, but still play it with the feel of a rock and roll kind of drummer.
There was a sort of feeling that no one was in control anymore. Everybody got the chance to do a solo album as a ways to an end of getting out of the rut of being in a group, which I thought was a pretty good idea. I thought, well, let's have 6 months off and we can do what we want.
By Relaya, we were so free. I mean, there were no boundaries into what we couldn't do, and what we shouldn't do was also another endless possibility. I think this then led to more difficulty, gradual more difficulty, because we all were learning so much We had to try and bend things to please people, and how, because we were all changing. People were buying, had already bought houses in England, and then they were going to leave and live somewhere else and travel around the world. So we kind of drifted geographically and drifted in a direction. So the direction just got good. When Rick came back and got on with Going for the One, it sort of ordered the group in direction. It helped to define the direction.
I say, John.
Yes?
Tense up, control room. We're ready to do one.
Oh, right. We'll run VT as well.
Your studio is tensing up down here, so if we just possibly tense up a little, and we'll try and wax a hot one. I shan't let the camera worry me now that I know that it is in fact on.
And we will find that we need to be where we belong. Parallel heights, display of rights and wrongs, and always keep it strong.
Can I just hear the new Mellotron sound, please? That wasn't really quite exaggerated enough.
After seeing all your sense of fear diminish, as you treat dangerous new collection, as you throw away misconceptions, going for the one, going for the one, going for the
Yes, the new Mellotron sound. So really good.
Can you bluff your way through that one?
I loved making that album. We all had such a tremendous time. It was a very happy period in the band's life. When Rick came back to the fold and was playing really great, I think there was some really creative moments.
We did what I think is the best Yes piece of music called Awaken. And it's a beautiful piece of music in structure and form, and it's got everything that I would desire of a group of musicians in this life. So out of that period of time, which seemed very grey, very much like the album cover of Relayer, 2 or 3 years of greyness, we came out with a beautiful, beautiful album called Going for the One.
Everyone was getting on really well, and we had a great time. And that's what that album, to me, means. It's the joining back to the fold of Rick Wakeman, and then the happiness about all of that.
In November of 1976, I was booked as a session musician, in the same way, really, that Tony Levin was booked for Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman and Howe. And I remember after about 2 weeks, nothing had even been worked out what I was going to get paid. It really was an immaterial point, but I mean, I knew someday I'd get a session fee or something for doing it. I was just having a feel that it's just the same as it was, really, in Close to the Edge type of days, you know, Fragile days. I remember thinking, God, it's just a bit of a shame, really. I feel more like part of the band than a session musician. Came to a situation where Claude Nobbs, who was the head of WA in Switzerland, threw a party, and we're all sitting around, and Brian Lane came over to me with Chris again. Chris is a unique character in as much as that he severely comes to the forefront when necessary, I think is the correct word. He is a very clever guy, apart from being a superb bass player. And they came and sat down one either side of me. I remember it quite clearly. And they said, well, we've got a situation. If we're going out on tour to promote this album when it's done, it's crazy. We're going to have to get somebody to come out and play your keyboard parts. And to be honest, it's going to be our job finding somebody to play the way that you play. So how would you feel about coming out and playing? I said, love to, yeah, it'd be great, yeah. He said, well, that sort of presents another problem, really. He said, because the Yes supporters out there won't really accept you as a sideman in the band. I mean, so how do you feel about sort of joining the band again, really, as a full-time member? And anyway, we'd probably have to pay you more as a session musician, as by the time the album's finished, is what's left as a cut, you know? And I laughed. I said, yeah, loves it, sounds great. They said, so you're in? I said, I'm in. They said, fantastic. About half an hour later, this melody maker appeared, and there's the five of us sitting in Montrose, Mountain Studios in Montrose, and there's a headline over the top. It's got Wakeman rejoins Yes. I went, oh, great, yeah, that's really good, and I'd like to know. And it was the day before his melody maker. Somebody had come in from London and they brought it with them. I said, yeah, it's great. I put it down and I went, hold on a minute. And I said to Brian, I said, but you've only just asked me. I said, how come this is, he said, educated guess. I said, well, what would you have done if I'd have said no, or they hadn't have decided they want me in the band? He said, well, it's just sort of one of those decisions that a manager has to make. So it was crazy.
Because I'd done my solo album, I realized how dogmatic I'd become with the guys, and I felt that maybe the time had come for me to let them do what they want to do. And Tomato came out of that.
You know, we used to come out. We used to come out into that. But what we were talking about is there was a slow verse. Is that where you are? At the end of it, yeah. Is that where you were?
We used up each other's energy, I think. You know, there was a refueling needed. And I think with Rick going and coming back, by the time we'd done Tomato, which was, although it had several good tracks on it, I know Arnett particularly liked Release. He said to us, he said, well, if all the albums like that, it'll be fantastic. And we all said, yeah, it's all like that. And of course, we never made albums that were all like one thing.
Tomato came out of that, which was a sort of combination of ideas without really anybody driving the project. We didn't have a good producer.
I wanted to see more bass and bass. I thought it was sounding quite good, actually. There you go. In some ways, it's not happening, is it? After I thought that was quite happening up to that. Yeah, I enjoyed playing it.
There's just a few magic parts in the original that are not there anymore.
I'd happily do it again, but you know, I happily don't want to sort of go on pressing for that situation.
Shall we go and do it again?
We then tried all sorts of things to come up with the next record. Went to Paris with Roy Thomas Baker.
I wasn't so sure about getting a producer, to be honest. We'd managed up till then.
No disrespect to Roy Thomas Baker, but the band was unproducible at that moment in time.
We just had this ridiculous time there where we just spent a fortune and had some great dinners and got very little done.
That's a tragedy. There were some fantastic songs, great material, but the timing was wrong.
Anyway, we didn't finish the album. We were in Paris and it was a mess and there was too much partying, you know.
John and I used to end up in the studio at 10 o'clock in the morning and to try and make things work. And it ended up, it was in my drinking days. I have to explain, I used to drink for Great Britain and the Great British Olympic team. I've been teetotal for 6 years, but I can remember the glory days. And John and I used to go off, not on drinking sprees, but almost to drown our sorrows, because we could both see that we felt this was the end of an era.
And we weren't like we were, you know, we were gradually losing more and more this sort of commune sort of feeling, because, you know, those early records were like very communal feeling.
We got tired of each other, you know. There was no respect anymore and we were all tired.
And John basically summed it up by saying, this is not how I wanted it all to finish. This is not the band that I envisaged. This is not how I wanted it. And I said, John, I couldn't agree with you more. So we decided that John and I would leave. Now, there were strange leaving circumstances here.
Richard Branson, who owns Virgin Airlines, and is a good friend of mine, and I went to go roller skating at midnight one night with him and broke my ankle.
As most people will know, even if they're not musicians, the ankle is a relatively important area for a drummer.
But it was a kind of blessing in disguise, because I don't believe in music. It was as good as it could have been.
John stuck by his decision, I stuck by my decision, and that was it.
Chris Allen and I had got an idea about direction based on a guitar trio.
We went into a period where Steve, Chris and myself were rehearsing in a small studio in London called Rodan, and just throwing lots of ideas around. And next door was Trevor Horn and Jeff Downes, who were the Buggles at the time, had a very successful single, and were fans of Yes music.
They came to our manager at the time, Brian Lane, and asked him to manage them. Of course, he jumped at the chance. There was this band walking in who already had a #1 single in all countries of the world, you know, making a fortune. Will you please manage us? And, oh, well, yeah, okay, I'll take the 20% if you like.
Next thing you know, they're in their room playing with us and singing, which was a lead-up to the album.
To Trevor, and we did all sorts of things together. And Chris drove it along, convinced that Trevor could do all these things, and Trevor could sing on stage and everything.
With Rick and John out of the picture, that I guess Alan, Steve and myself worked pretty hard on trying to make sure that the music was pretty happening.
Musically, has a lot of credibility. It has a lot of great playing and a lot of great music on it. And of course we followed that with a tour of the same format.
John was a formidable person to replace, so Trevor found it's not exactly his dream, but Chris's dream wasn't really a reality. He soldiered on through that to try and, you know, do his utmost to present it as well as he could.
I was very proud that he actually kind of adapted to being able to do that.
And to do some things in the footsteps of John, who he'd idolized almost before that, was a very hard thing for him to do. And so after that kind of tour, everything yet again dissipated. Trevor went back to producing.
Jeff had the idea, well, he wanted to do the next Buggles record and a few other things. So hence, before long, Jeff had done that and he was in Asia with me.
Chris and myself just kept on writing together. We spent a period working with Jimmy Page.
This great theoretical band that was going to be called XYZ, very appropriately, Yes Zeppelin.
We recorded, I think, 5 or 6 tracks with Jimmy that was eventually dissipated yet again because of managerial problems.
We wanted to get on with, you know, producing something. And so around that time we started to look for new, look around for new ideas.
Atlantic Records, Chris and myself were still wondering how to further the career of Yes. And they suggested we try out a guitarist called Trevor Rabin.
Strangely enough, 2 years prior to that, I'd been given a tape, strangely enough again, by Brian Lane, of Trevor Rabin.
I get a call from this guy, Richard Steinberg, who was at Atlantic at the time, he wanted me to join these 2 bands. I found him, I said, which bands? He said, well, Keith Emerson's getting a band together with Jack Bruce, and, you know, Jack's worked with you. Jack Bruce played on my 3rd solo album. And so, you know, he said, yeah, we should get him and whatever. And then the other band is Chris Squire and Alan White. I'm looking for someone, you know, singer-songwriter, guitar player. And I didn't speak to Keith, but I spoke to Chris. And I said, what do you want to do? And he said, well, I've heard your tapes, and you know, I'm impressed, and I'd love to get together and see what happens.
Alan and I met him. You know, we sort of just immediately got on very well. In fact, we went to my house and played down in my studio, and it was probably the worst jam that anyone's ever had, but it didn't seem to matter because we already knew we liked each other.
It sounded awful, but it kind of felt good. It was kind of strange because the sound was weird, but I felt there was definitely a communication there. They just finished working with Jimmy Page, and I started working on some of the tracks they were doing with Jimmy, and redid some of the guitars and stuff. And it started sounding pretty good.
It had always been a shame, in a way, that Tony's departure from the band hadn't really been the most justified fact of life in many ways. And so I got in touch with him and asked him, do you want to, you know, maybe come back? I got a new guitarist, and, you know, you want to come and have a go at this other band, which was going under the working title of Cinema.
We had really no aspirations of putting Yes back together. It was more of Trevor was very inspirational, and it was really a playing thing. I think we played for 9 months.
Trevor had a lot of material, and Chris had material, and we had things we worked on together.
Atlantic came down and didn't like it.
They had some doubts about whether, you know, we shouldn't have a separate singer, but we wanted to carry on like that.
Chris had a studio in London. I said, let's go into your studio and just put some of these songs down, and then we can shop them around. And we did that, and Atlantic heard the tapes and loved the tapes, and the deal went skyrocketing, and it was enough to enable us to do an album.
We started recording the music with Trevor Horn.
Spent about a year, 9 months, doing the album, finishing the album.
And once again, John came to town.
John wasn't doing anything specific, and he'd called Chris about 3 months before. And he said, well, why don't we play to him?
Came to the studio, listened to the material, and liked it, and you know, decided he wanted to sing on it.
He came down, he sang on a couple of tracks, and purely by just putting the faders up and listening to what was going on, it was like the 80s version of a modern Yes with John. So there really wasn't anything we could call the band from that point on but Yes again.
2 years were incredible because it was the first time really major success had come to the band in a single top of the charts. You know, girls screaming and stuff like that.
Rebirth of Yes, and out of that came 90125, which was the most successful album the band has ever had. So it was a long turnaround, as it was.
Sing all the lead vocals, right? You know, Own of a Lonely Heart, I'm singing the choruses, and Changes, I'm singing the...
I went to a live video from the tour. It went on to become Mr. Sex, Lies and Videotapes, and originally Sting won it because it was kind of Sting's year at the time.
A letter from Arista when I was looking for a solo deal before 90125 after Geffen and I had split up, saying, while we feel your voice has top 40, there were 3 songs on it, Changes, Own of a Lonely Heart, and City of Love. While we feel your voice has top 40 potential, we feel the songs are far too left field for the marketplace. So that just made me totally determined that those were the right songs. To write a song, there's only 2 ways of doing it, you know, your way and the wrong way. You know, and it's a very presumptuous thing to say, but I think every writer has that kind of thing when it's changed, it's like, no, that's wrong, but it's not wrong. It's very set, you know, whereas I guess it's easier for Chris because he comes with very set ideas on what he wants to do, but there's more of a collaborative kind of thing. And, you know, I've opened up a lot more than when we first started, but on 90125, I know I was very kind of, it's got to be this, it's got to be that.
We had the next album coming up, which was a big generator.
Which, once again, was not the most painless of Yes albums.
Re-recording tracks, and people not sure about the way songs were going.
In fact, Alan White and I think, played the bass and drum parts on Big Generation approximately like about 21 months before it was released, by the time the rest of it got sorted out.
When it came to Big Generator, you know, I get very involved in the engineering and the production of it, you know, and it's very difficult for me to just let things happen, you know, because if I write a song, I want it to go in a certain direction, and you know, John's kind of free-spirited in that way, and it's sometimes hard to pin him down, and I was determined to pin him down. And he didn't like being pinned down, so we had a problem. And it was a very, very difficult album. The most difficult album I've ever done.
Virtually back around to the past period of time, which Trevor kind of departed and did his solo tour. I had a solo album out.
When the time comes, run, don't step away. Give me something to hold on to, something to...
I get withdrawal symptoms if I'm not on the road for long periods. And when I did my solo tour, my management said, this is definitely not something you should do. You know, the record, you know, you've had a #1 AOR song, the record's done okay, and, you know, get on with something else now. But the record company wanted me to tour. And it was something that we were going to lose an absolute fortune doing it. We knew that going in. And I said, I don't care, I need to play. You know, I hadn't played live for a year, and it was, I wanted to go out on the road.
We have been writing most of the time, Chris and Tony and myself, and of course John went away and did the AWBH thing through that period, after Big Generator, and up until the time I explained, whereby it really started to become common sense that something like this could be done to bring the whole thing into one package.
CNN, Pensacola, Florida.
Is this a rockumentary?
I knew I was in for trouble when I saw your Dan Quayle watch.
One time I was in the office of the Yes Group, and there was this big discussion about getting a producer, and John Culloden was there, remember? And Roy Thomas Baker. Let's get Roy Thomas Baker. I said, oh great. So I said, well, what's he done lately? Being a little bit vague, I didn't really know. The Cars, John Culloden said. I mean, what else has he done? Foreigner. Oh, well, let's listen to their albums. And we put their albums on, and both drum sounds sounded exactly the same. I said, Alan, that's the kind of drum sound you're going to get.
Seemed to be working. Actually, I heard those tapes. And there was like this huge drum sound and a tiny little keyboard.
I remember John used to sit
guitar.
in that room in Paris, and we'd be playing away down in this pit down in the studio, and John was up there painting pictures, and sometimes we'd be rehearsing a song, and John was singing a total other song in the microphone to himself, like right in the next song we're going to do.
Another song, yeah. It was a slow experience.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah. Picasso, Sol Picasso lies still, a portrait of man of the past.
That's it. Yeah.
A future secured by the stroke of a brush, curled around the warm feel of the paint that he trusted so well.
Can you use that later? It's good, Larry.
Yeah, I thought so.
If I showed Coca-Cola, do you think they'll send me a few cans for nothing? Because nobody sends me sod all these days. One of the hardest things in the world is to copy other keyboard players' styles. And it's interesting actually, because what happens is you end up doing a version of your own. It brings up an interesting point, because there's lots of the tracks that Tony's done of mine live and tracks that I've done which Tony played live. Tony's been checking out with me what the actual chords were and things that I played on And You and I. And it was interesting, he had a totally different view of what he thought I played. And Yours Is No Disgrace, which I've played for years, I've been playing totally different to as the original as Tony did it. And it's interesting when you put all the things together. It sounds crap. No, actually, when you put all the things together, it sounds fantastic. So it's interesting what can happen with pieces, how you can do it.
The reason it's so quiet, of course, is because if I had to tune 10 guitars and listen to them, it disturb a lot of people, disturb me. You do them like with the machine, and then you just give them a little check when you've done it.
I don't know whether this drill is bothering you or not, but here we are in an advanced stage of chaos at a live gig. First thing you have to do as a drummer is learn the music. And the music is all over the place, and happily the set list keeps changing. And I have to figure out how I'm going to read that in the cover of complete darkness with flashing lights.
This is where we tune the guitars. If I don't tune the guitars, I'm out of here. This is where I get to hear Trevor scream at me. Nothing's working. It's a fun job.
See what happened? I was doing a gig, and this went faulty, and I just got very upset. So at the end of the show, it was a very important show. I mean, I was only 18, I think. I took the guitar and I thought, oh shit, and I just kind of threw it like that, hoping that who was doing his job at the time would catch it. He didn't catch it. You can see where it snapped along there. And I tried 22 different necks. Couldn't come up with one. So I found a guy who put that in and fixed it. Oops, sorry about that. And he fixed it, and it's been great. There's no neck like this. It's the best neck on earth. And then of course my airbrush stuff and everything was done during the what times could we call it? The mad times. And this guitar went into the army with me. Spent a year in the army with me. This guitar's got a lot of stories. Primarily, I think John McLaughlin's been a major influence. Funnily enough, some time back, he was doing a Shakti tour, and some people had told him about me or something. I just moved to LA, and I can't remember exactly the story. The management phoned up because I think it was Al Di Meolo couldn't make it at the time or something. So they asked if I would be interested in doing it, and I said, well, of course, you know, it's a silly question. But I couldn't do it contractually. I wasn't allowed to do it.
No, actually on this stage.
Oh, on the stage, yes. My home is right down here.
And your toilet is Alan White's drum kit.
You can see where I live, right down here. In fact, I just swing off here like an ape. And this is my bed here.
Very quite nice, isn't it?
Let's keep it.
It's quite a very lovely bed.
It's a pretty nice bed, yes. Yes, it's a pity I have to share it with someone else.
Yes, I know, but really? I'm hoping to move out soon. It's not going awfully well, is it?
That's no fair.
I don't think I'm ready.
I was born in a musical family. My father was a great piano player and played for some of the big bands during the war years. Sort of somewhere between semi-pro and pro musician. He played piano in the style of Fats Waller. Great piano player.
My grandmother had a piano, and she was a pianist, and she sat me down at the piano, and that was it.
The whole family used to go around and do what they used to call in England called concert parties, a bit like Follies. They used to go around. There was my uncle was a comedian and played the banjo, and as I say, my mum used to sing, my dad used to play the piano, and they were actually called the YESYEARS.
At 6 years old, my parents put me on the piano, which was something I've never forgot, because it's the best thing they ever did, you know, in their life for me, because it gave me a sense of melody as well as percussion.
I think my sister had a boyfriend, and when I was about 10, she must have been about 14, 15, or 15 or 16 or something. And he gave her some brushes, you know, and said, if you play them on the back of an album sleeve, which used to be made of thick white card, you know, they sound just like a drum. So she passed them on to me and said, play these, they sound just like a drum on the back of them. So I learned to play the brushes first, then I got a pair of sticks, then I got a practice pad, then I got a drum, then I got 2 drums. You know, now I understand kids go out and buy 17 drums at once.
They noticed I was being pretty percussive about the way I played the piano. So my uncle persuaded my parents to buy me a set of drums as well as play piano. And after 3 months of owning a drum kit, I was playing in a band live on stage. So I was on stage at a very early age.
Well, the first inkling of rock and roll obviously was the skiffle times. There was a guy in England called Lonnie Donegan.
Just becoming aware of rock guitar and rock music generally was very, very powerful when Bill Haley came out with Rock Around the Clock. But not only Bill Haley, but then Presley and Little Richard and all these people. So that was like what we'd call a rude awakening, where I went, wow, this is really something I'm going to be part of, you know, immediately.
Me and my brother, you know, we sang just like the Everlys and knew all the songs backwards way. My brother tried to look like Elvis Presley, and we were in a group, you know. So first song I ever sang was Come On Everybody, you know, Eddie Cochran, you know, and look here, what's all this? Here comes that girl again, you know.
I was not a pop music fan at all. I spent all my early years singing in choir and had been trained and ended up singing in Guildford Cathedral Choir and also I sang in St Paul's Cathedral Choir as well. So my whole musical upbringing was through church music, really, English church music.
At the age of 13, I came under the influence of older boys at a school. And the drummer was leaving the school, he was 17, 18. They were looking for a kid to train up to play in all the jazz groups. We played Monk, and we played Coltrane, and we played Art Blakey. And I grew up with the traditional British point of view that America was jazz, and jazz was America, and if you want to know anything about drumming, you study jazz, which is true, and what you do today.
Well, I come from a family of musicians. My mother's a piano teacher, was a piano teacher. My father was the lead violinist of the Johannesburg Symphony Orchestra for 12 years. And my brother was winning every classical music competition in sight from the age of 7 on violin. And my sister's a classically trained ballet teacher, you know, I mean, so, and she's a great pianist. So I come from a kind of pretty talented family. It was just automatic. Anyone coming into that family was going to be a musician. It's kind of, it was automatic. I think they would have been thrown out if they weren't.
My father insisted that I listened to all different sorts of music, everything from pop that was on the radio to bits of jazz to classical, to get a whole rounded view of music. He didn't want me to be blinking, but he said, I want you to do that classical training because that will give you the technique to be able to do everything you want. He said, that my boy, the classical technique will be your vocabulary. He said, a writer is only as good as the words that he knows.
At the age of 5, I started piano lessons. I also started entering competitions and classical competitions, and the incentive for me to work so I can win them for my parents. They wanted me to win them. I wanted to win them because I was promised a Cliff Richard and the Shadows record if I did.
I was playing in rock bands when I was 13, jazz bands, I played in pubs, anywhere I could play.
I also played clarinet, and I was playing in a couple of traditional jazz bands. Then I got involved with a big band, a dance band, a 16-piece orchestra that I played piano in, and playing Basie and Ellington.
At the age of 12, my brother was playing drums at parties, bar mitzvahs, birthdays, and I thought, boy, I'd love to do that. And for my birthday, I got a guitar. Within 10 days, having never ever picked up a guitar, within 10 days I was playing in my brother's band. And obviously incredibly badly. But you know, just from the piano I taught myself. I've never had a guitar lesson in my life, so I taught everything I know on guitar, I taught myself from the piano, or inspiration from other people.
I decided to attempt not to play anything that other people played in the rock field. It was obviously of great strength came to rock guitar from blues, but I was fighting that. I was like in another track, trying to find another direction. One that wasn't static, because blues rock guitar seemed to me to be a very one picture, one approach. Part of what broadened my possibilities was acquiring other instruments that I could learn to play, and therefore add that sound to it.
I guess 1965 I was a fan of the early Who and John Entwistle, who was quite a major influence on my playing, of course. You know, especially with the more twangy, trebly sounding bass thing. You know, even though I'd been a Jack Bruce fan, I guess John probably was more influential. I was 17, I guess I got my first Rickenbacker, which was like the third one that had ever come to England.
Scotty Moore's guitar breaks, I think, on Hound Dog, I remember as being fantastic and not sounding quite like a guitar. It sounded like a guy banging trash can lids. I don't know whether you can hear it in your ears now. It was Scotty Moore, I think. And they had this guitar break which sounded like banging his chairs up and down. I thought, this is great. Somebody's telling me this is a guitar, but it doesn't sound like a guitar. Brilliant. I'll make the drums not sound like the drums. It sounds great.
What did it take to, you know, to be in the rock and roll business? I don't know. Nobody really knew. So I decided to, as many of us did, to go to art school till I was thrown out. As many of us were, I think.
And I went to the Royal College of Music. I got, there's 5 major colleges in London. I was very lucky. I applied for them all. I got in and to all of them. I chose the Royal College. The college was a factory. It cared about music, certainly, but was turning out musicians for what? For a musical world that didn't exist anymore. It was turning out hundreds of musicians for orchestra, hundreds of musicians for work that didn't exist. And at that time I was sneaking off and doing sessions, which was totally illegal at the college. I mean, you weren't allowed to do it, but I used to do it. Because there's no way I was going to complete this course. I was doing sessions for people like Mark Bolan, David Bowie, all the Visconti sessions and all the Gustavs. I was having a field day. And because I felt I was contributing something to music. I'd found an area where I could give back all that I'd taken from my wonderful music teacher and from my father, and even the small bits at college that I'd learned. I suddenly found here was something I could give.
As soon as you can become professional, you're in the game, you know, you're in the chance to be, at that time, to have a record. But you didn't think about recording, actually, the early days. You just wanted to get on the road, get in the van and go to a different town and, you know, wow them out.
Innocence, no answer to your breaking heart. If the situation sometimes falls apart, in this ecstasy, times are broken. No emotion falling through your arms. Morning and daydream.
sitting around one day and I got a telephone call. Somebody said, John's on the phone for you. I said, I don't know any Johns. And it was a telephone call from John Lennon, who that I thought was a hoax initially. And he'd seen me playing somewhere, and he called me up and said, I'd like you to do a gig with myself in Toronto tomorrow. No, day after tomorrow. And I said, well, I'm not sure, but I think we have a gig, but I'll see what I can do, kind of situation. I turned up at the VIP lounge at London Heathrow Airport, and there was Eric Clapton and John and Yoko and Klaus Voormann. And we literally rehearsed on the airplane. John and Eric playing acoustic guitars, and me with a pair of drumsticks on the back of an airplane seat. All of a sudden, we were being picked up in Toronto and taken straight to the gig. We got straight on stage. And me being kind of young and naive to that kind of big star kind of thing, it was over too quickly before I didn't really realize what I'd just been through. Playing on stage with Eric Clapton and John Lennon in front of all those people was just like a real burst into, it was the biggest break in my career.
I've done a lot of different guesting appearances on projects, jumping on board a tour, doing this and that. One was back in that late 60s period when I got asked to be P.P. Arnold's guitarist. She was doing great at the time, and she wanted to go out on tour, and she got a tour date with Delaney and Bonnie, and this featured Eric Clapton, of course. And we went out on tour for a month around Europe. It was a very memorable time. I had no responsibilities, and I really had very little awareness of what I could do with myself, other than I was somewhat in demand. The guitarists I had to be around were all like George Harrison, Eric Clapton, Dave Mason, had positions in the rock field, and I was sort of like trying to find one. So it was great to be there and see these guys having a great time, go on tour, and see what can be missing so much is that rock and roll can be fun, you know, like clean fun.
When I started, I saw the birth of keyboards and was lucky enough to be part and parcel of helping to develop a lot of them. I can remember we had the problem, we were doing the stuff in the studio, and I was using quite a few keyboards, although there weren't many keyboards made at that time. They weren't made for the road, certainly. And there was no such thing as stands, there was no keyboard monitors or whatever. So I had to build these like tables, and I just plonked them all on top of each other. And I can remember Melody Maker at the time just running a front page purely on the fact that I was stacking up keyboards. And everybody thought I was just absolutely stupid. If I've given nothing else to the music industry, I will always have a small smile of satisfaction when I walk into pubs and bars and just see even old boys sitting at the piano with a couple of keyboards stacked up, you know. Even if people don't like my music, you know, I contributed something there.
The mic stand right over here. Now I'll be able to see how far you can working.
That's the way it should be done.
Stop that. You know where you live.
Having learnt the music, next thing you have to do is find some drums to play, assign some sound. So down here we have a TV. It's going to show me on the screen here that I've got a bamboo hat, talking drum, a timbale, and then various other drums up here, which are all going to sound together. They're going to sound like this. But meanwhile, up here I have the basic drums. Those kind of things. So that would be settled for that particular tune, which is called Lift Me Up. However, when you get to another tune, maybe you need different drums. We call up another drum kit for, let's say, the tune Awaken. And lo and behold, everything's changed. those are all the instruments needed for that particular tune. So that's why there's a computer up here to allow me to store enough sounds that I can cater for the whims of Maestro Anderson, who you know, knows that drums can do anything these days and constantly and consistently requires that.
I've always felt that it would be a good idea. You know, you get about 8 people who are really talented playing together, you can finish up with a very stylized idea. And I think it's like the evolution of a band, you know, if it does it properly and there's a spirit within the band to want to do it, then it's done for the main reason, which is music.
And we could have a great time doing it, you know.
Definitely.
Have a good time, at the end of it we'll see what we want to do, if anything. I think that's the way to approach it. I think it's being dishonest to say, yeah, in 5 years we'll still be going strong. Who knows?
As long as we can overcome the waywardness of business and get on with good music, that really is what will make it a significant move for the band known as Yes.
Once you've been in Yes, even though you leave, there's a strange thing. A certain part of you never ever leaves, because it is such a tight organisation that sticks by itself and its members and looks after its own. And it is the musicians who are there at the time who, for want of a better word, have the honour of continuing making the Yes music.
I have this little quip. The mid-70s, 76, 77, they used to call us boring old farts. Now we are.
It became blatantly obvious to me when we all started playing together what a wealth of material that there is floating around, a wonderful wealth of talent, and nobody has anything they feel they have to prove anymore, so the music really overrides everything, and I think that will continue to be.
Making an idea work that was dreamed up, that wasn't sort of tested to start with, so we're sort of finding our feet now together, working out how we make the transition from an idea into reality.
Yes, I would think is one of the few bands that I can imagine playing in that would have any interest for me at all. You know, but I'm allowing myself very happily to fall back towards a fairly creative musical environment.
It sort of intrigued us, and we started to sort of knit it all into the picture. You know, we came up with a nice combination of the talents once again.
Yes is a band that does not like to look at the horizon, like to try and see over it, into the future.
I have a strange suspicion that there could be a Yes in existence way after I'm dead and buried. And that might sound crazy. In the same way that there will be a New York Philharmonic or whatever, or Boston Symphony Orchestra. I really feel there's going to be a Yes way into the 21st century. And way after we're dead and gone, we might be just part of the history books.
Tell the man you tell